noise.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership funk and soul keyboardist and songwriter Mose Davis, an original member of the Counts and a longtime featured player with Hamilton Bohannon. He also released a solo album in 1978, and he continues to play today. Mose, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I am fine. Excited to be here on broadcast.
Well, so good to have you. And I assume you're in your home today. Whereabouts in the country is that?
It's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Are you from there originally, or?
I'm born in Birmingham, Alabama, moved to Detroit. All of my apprentice days in music was in Detroit during the Motown era and the jazz explosion era. So I got a mixture of both.
Uh-huh. Well, what a influential place to grow up, musically speaking. I mean, that's the center of it all, right there.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
What inspired you to pick up the keyboards, and how'd you get into it?
Well, my mother and father both played, so I got a love for music from just listening and learning from watching them play. So when they get up from the piano, we had a upright piano in the house. When they get up, I'd get up there and play and make some sense out of it. And so they saw I had a little talent. And at around, I'd say 8, they started me with piano lessons.
So, what extent did you have formal training versus just kind of picking up stuff on your own?
I would say the formal training started around about 9 years old because they saw I had some talent. I had a good ear. If they played something, I could pick it up. So they said, "Oh, yeah, and everybody, my whole family would say, he's good. He needs training and blah, blah, blah." So, yeah, I started training then around 9 years old. I had a little lady teacher that everybody always gives the same story. The little old lady with the ruler that taps your hand. I had that. And I advanced from that to the Detroit Conservatory of Music. And I stayed there for, I'd say, about 4 years. And my instructor told my mom that he's good. I can't teach him anymore because he knows where he wants to go, and it's not where I want to teach him. And where I wanted to go was more jazz and funk instead of the classical direction.
Mm-hmm. So, knowing that, who were some of your top influences musically?
Okay, my main influence in blues was Jimmy Reed and Howlin' Wolf. The influence in jazz was Jimmy Smith, the organ player. And that's a whole, we can go into that in a minute. And then on piano, on piano, Ahmad Jamal, definitely Ahmad Jamal, you know. And of course, you had Motown going on. And so I was hearing that. And the thing I picked up from Motown was the energy of the music, the feel of the music. And so what happened, I wanted to just converge on all of those genres and get a sound of my own.
And what was, if you can recall, an early show you saw, a performer you saw at a young age that really just, you were like, wow?
That's interesting. Really, when I was playing, I was always playing the phonograph that we had in the house. I was always playing that. I get out of school and then I go right down and start listening to the phonograph. So I heard Jimmy Smith playing, and I asked my mom. I said, "Mom, what is that?" She said, "It's an organ." And I said, "Yeah, but what's that low thing down there?" She said, "That's an organ." And so that influenced me into playing bass lines with the organ, which I used with the counts, and that gave us that sound because we didn't use the bass player. Um, the first live performer I saw that got me was Richard Groove Holmes, the organ player. And he was so good with that bass line. I was just blown out, just blown away, blown away. Jimmy Reed I saw also, but people for some reason they didn't respect blues players in Detroit during the '60s and '70s, so the sound wasn't good and blah blah blah. But I loved it.
But were you a teenager at that point?
Yes, I was. hmm
Uh,
hmm But yeah, young. I didn't. When I was a youngster, I didn't really get to see much of anybody. So I just developed my sound and went from there. When I was a teenager, that's when I first started playing out live I'd say around 17, what have you, playing piano because I couldn't afford an organ at that time.
what was your first professional, so to speak, experience, whether it was on stage or in a studio before the counts?
I'd say I was about 17 years old and I would practice in Detroit, and the door was open, and a guy came up. He heard me because it was a bus stop right by my house. He came up. He says, "Hey, would you like to do a gig?" And I said, "Yeah." So I thought I was on my way to stardom. I said, "Oh, I made it." So I went and with him, and we played a gig, and I was playing a out of tune piano, and but it just the feeling of it, the feeling of playing for people, it was just tremendous. I was hooked right after that. I
Hmm.
might have paid $10 for the gig, but it didn't matter.
So did you think you were going to make a career and living out of it at that point, or were you still kind of unsure?
Always thought that. However, I was going to play for the Detroit Tigers. That was my wish. I knew I was going to be a professional baseball player, and that was my dream. I was a pretty good athlete, and so I tried out for my high school team, and I was a great hitter. So I thought, and so I went up to bat for the tryout and saw a curveball come at me. I said, "Oh, I don't know if I can do this." Yeah, I didn't make the team either. So I said, okay, well, let me look over at music a little more seriously here. Yeah.
Was that like around the era of like Harmon Killebrew and um,
Yeah.
yeah,
LK,
yeah,
Rocky Vito, Norm Cash, Denny McClain.
yeah. They had some great players. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jim Northrup. We can go on now if you want to. I love sports.
Yeah. That's my loves too. Music and sports. You can't beat them.
Yes. And they're similar too. They're both performers. Uh, you execute. It's very similar.
And competitive and yeah.
Very, very competitive. Yes.
hmm So, Mose, on your credits, it shows 1973 for being both Bohannon and the Counts. So, which came first? How did that work out?
Definitely the counts. I was in high school. We can go back. We can go back to elementary school. Even I had two friends in Detroit. We were just best friends, and we loved the Jamal. We loved the Jamal, and one friend played the guitar. The other guy, he wanted to be a drummer. So we said, "Yeah, man, we're gonna call ourselves the Counts." But it wasn't really as a group. It was just us three individuals being cool guys that dressed well, treated the ladies nice, and was just three respectable guys. So as time went on, one guy passed. He had, very young, and the other guy went out of sight. But I said, I'm going to keep this going. When I get a group, I'm going to name that group the Counts. So that's how the name the Counts came about. And I met Keith Mangrum. He's a percussion player. And Shelton Hill, he played sax. I met them when I went to high school. And so the Counts was formed right there. And we did some amateur things, and Keith and we did the organ and conga drum thing, and we won a music what would you call it?
Talent show.
Yeah, a talent show where you put something on tape and you submitted it to the radio station. And so we recorded something, submitted it to the radio station, and we went all the way to number 2. And number 1 was Carolyn Crawford. And Carolyn Crawford was the singer on Bohannon's Come On and Do It, Let's Start to Dance. But this was way before that. So Carolyn Crawford was number 1. We were number 2 at the time. And that's basically how the Count started, got our name. And we expanded the group from that. We added a couple of saxophone players. Andrew Gibson came aboard, and we had everything. We had the sax players, we had the drummer, we had percussionists. We were lacking a guitar, though. We had a hard time finding a guitar player. We drilled a couple of them, maybe 3, 4, 5. We couldn't find one. So Andrew, our drummer, needed some drums. And so we went to Grinnell's music store in Detroit. It was a popular music store. And we went in there, and my sister, she signed for Andrew, the drummer, to get a set of drums. So we were jamming with the drums that Andrew was going to back. And this guy comes up and he says, "Hey man, can I sit in with you guys?" And he sat in with us, and that was Leroy Emanuel. So once we got Leroy, it was complete. And then we started working and getting very popular, and just one thing led to another, and we got a contract to record Jan Jan, and there it is.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Leroy's been on the show.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. He was. I enjoyed him a lot because he's had a very interesting career, also.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were on that first album. What's Up Front That Counts?
Very much so.
Okay, because I was just looking at your credits on Discogs, and for whatever reason, they started with Love Sign. But
No.
Yeah.
The first thing we did was Jan Jan. After Jan Jan was very successful in up where we were in the Detroit area. Then following that, we had Get Down People, which was huge. That was, I would say, that was our biggest record. Get Down People was like number 2 or 3 in Jet magazine. It hit the charts for R&B in Billboard, much higher than Jan Jan. It was a bigger record. It was a vocal thing, we wasn't saying much, but it's still vocal. Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about the chemistry of the Counts, and also sort of how that chemistry created that sound?
Okay, now we go back to the fact that when the Counts came out, there were no self-contained units, first of all. Like, for instance, now we were in Detroit, Motown, Smokey and Barrett Strong, and who's the creator of Motown?
Berry Gordy.
Berry Gordy. They handle everything. They wrote the music, they wrote the lyrics, they did everything. The Counts, we wrote our own lyrics, we made our own music. And the thing that separated us from everybody else had a bass player. We didn't have a bass player. I played bass on the organ pedals. So that gave us that sound. That gave us that sound that if you listen to us and you listen, you'll hear there's no bass player. That's the organ playing the bottom. So that distinguished us from everybody. So we were the first self-contained group. And I'll argue that with anybody. We were the first self-contained group to get on, to be charted on R&B charts and what have you. You might have had them on jazz records, but nobody was doing funk but us with no bass player. That no bass player thing with that smooth bottom led to the synthesizer playing bass. I can expound on that. We were playing at a club in Detroit. Bohannon came in. I didn't know Bohannon at this time, but he came in to hear us. He knew Leroy. So he came in to hear us, and Stevie was with him. Stevie Wonder was with him. Stevie was in that early part of his career where he was doing some things. Motown was producing it and whatever. He wasn't really doing his thing yet. So Stevie sat in with us, and Stevie, we did Here I Am Baby. And so when we finished Here I Am Baby, Steve was playing drums. He sat there for a minute. I'll never forget this. He sat there and he said, There's no, there's no bass player up here. And Leroy said, no, the organ's playing bass. He said, oh. He thought for a while. He came back again, sat in. Next thing we know, he came out with Superstition. He was playing bass on the synth. I take credit for that. I take credit for that. And then we went out with we had put out What's Up Front That Counts after that, and that was successful and all. So we toured with the Funkadelics and what's his name, Bernie
Worrell.
Yeah. Bernie heard us, and Bernie said the same thing. He said, "You're not using the bass." I said, "No, I'm playing with the organ." So then Bernie came out with Flashlight. I take semi credit for that. But, people don't know that. I tell the story sometimes and people look at me like, yeah, right. So I don't tell it much.
What was your first, was that your first thought when you heard Flashlight for the first time?
Yeah, of course. I said, oh, Ernie, okay. You got Bootsy over there, but you playing bass yourself. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely innovative in the early 70s, then in the later 70s into the 80s, a lot of funk bands started doing that.
Yeah, but we're the first. If you check back, check back to Jan Jan at the year. I think Jan Jan came out around 66. But if you go back and look at 66, everybody used the bass player. We were the first. When Get Down People, I think was 1970. During that time, Sly came out, so everybody was trying to do the Larry Graham thing on the bottom. So we definitely that distinguished our sound.
What was it? Was that necessity, or that you were trying to sound different by doing that?
No, we were just doing our thing, which goes back to you were asking me who I listened to. So I listened to Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith played bass. All those jazz guys played bass themselves. So I got that from them. But then the music that we were playing wasn't jazz. We were playing funk. So I just played funk and used the bass pedals. Because I really couldn't find a bass player that would sound like we wanted him to sound because of the way we wrote stuff at that time.
I will say, though, that you definitely, to my ears, had some jazz and rock influence in what you were doing.
I listened to Jimmy Smith, Jack McDuff, Groove Holmes, Don Patterson, all those guys. I listen and I can emulate all of them. Leroy listened to Wes Montgomery, Grant Green, all the top guitar players. Demo, the saxophone man, he listened to Lou Donaldson, John Coltrane. And so we all had this jazz. We were jazz heads, but we wanted to record funk because we figured that's where the money was. And we listened to Motown and all of that. So Booker T and all those guys. So that's where we wanted to be. So, but we had the jazz chops, so that gave us a sound also, because the funk guys couldn't really compete with us when it came down to just soloing and what have you, because that's what we did.
Right. So you mentioned doing concert bills with Funkadelic at one point.
Yeah.
What were they like? What was your guys' impression of Funkadelic at that point?
Oh, we loved them. We were on the Westbound label together. So before we went out with them, it was somewhat like a competition thing. But after going out with them, we got to really know them, and I got to be great friends with Bootsy. That was my man, and we just wake up shooting the breeze and playing the dozens with each other. And it was a great experience for us. And, we were like opening up for them. So we got to travel on the West Coast. And that's when we found out the popularity that we had. We had no idea. Mm-hmm.
Westbound between you guys and Funkadelic and Ohio players. And I mean, man.
The Ohio players on there, the Detroit Emeralds, Bobby Franklin Insanity Band, the Funkadelic, and us.
Yeah, I like that lineup.
Yeah, yeah.
And man, what's up front that counts? That's one of my favorites, man. What an epic jam that is.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember first recording that? And
yep. We were playing this all night gig, and so we knew we had to put an album together. And at this time, I was into like Three Dog Night, Santana, um, Leroy, somewhat similar. So we wanted to do. We noticed that people were doing extended tunes. So we wanted to put together an extended tune with some solos and all of that. So we rehearsed, and I put my ideas on it. Demo, Leroy, everybody added ideas, and that's basically it. We just wanted to do a tune that was different but funky with some licks and what have you. And we came up with that. And also the part now, when it starts out, we got that thing, whoop, that thing going. And they call that the boom box. Nobody was doing that before we did it. So I'm back to that again. But yeah, that's how we started it out. And we just wanted to kind of just space out and do a nice tune. So that's how it came about.
yeah. And of course, at first we didn't mention, but it was the Fabulous Counts, and then just the Counts.
Yeah, when we first started, we had a manager, Fred McClure, and he put that title on us. He said, "Well, you guys, we got to do something to just to emphasize you guys." So he put Fabulous on it. And so when Jan Jan came out and Get Down People, it was the Fabulous Counts. And we had rabbit ears, and there was some people, they might have been a little jealous or something, and they said, some of these groups out here is calling themselves fabulous and calling themselves this and that and the other, and it's up to other people to say whether you're great or not. And so our rabbit ears say, hey, let's just call ourselves the Counts and prove ourselves with our music. So that's why we cut it down to the Counts.
Mm-hmm. Well, Fabulous Flames is the obvious one I think of immediately with that moniker, Fabulous. Yeah. Did you ever do any shows with James Brown?
No. Personally, let's see. Candy Staten. I went overseas with Candy Staten. And let's see who else. Carl Anderson, Jimmy Ruffin, David's brother. I can go on and on, really.
I was referring to the concert tickets that you shared the bill with, not necessarily that you played with. Is that what you were talking about?
Oh no, I played with those people.
Yeah.
So, we shared the bill, of course, with Funkadelics and Isley Brothers. We toured the West Coast. Graham Central Station was on that bill too. We got to know them quite well. Let's see, who else did we? Jimmy Reed. We did a thing with Jimmy Reed. That's when I got to hear Jimmy Reed.
That must have been a thrill for you after being a fan.
Oh, big thrill. Ahmad Jamal, we did a show with Ahmad Jamal. That was a bigger thrill, Jimmy Smith. So quite a few. Those were the ones I can remember.
So you got to meet your heroes pretty much.
Huh?
You got to meet your heroes eventually at some point.
Yeah, I met all of them. Jimmy Smith, Jack McDuff, Ma Jamal, Groove Holmes, all of them pretty much. Yeah. hmm
Wow,
hmm
that's living the dream right there, right?
Yeah, yeah. And Lonnie Smith, the organ player, I know you've heard of him.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, I got to be great friends with him, and he pretty much he bolstered my confidence in myself. You know, he was telling me some things he admired about my playing and how I took the jazz thing and did the stuff we're talking about, and that really meant a lot to me. And this happened later in life for me, maybe about 10 years ago or less. Yeah. hmm When I was thinking, oh well, and I talked to Lonnie, and that brightened up a lot of things for me.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear. Um,
Uh,
Most the counts. What was the core audience like at that time when you guys were touring and so forth?
basically, we came out, the counts came out, we were like seniors in high school. And the main audience was high school seniors, freshmen, college, because we played a lot of college campuses. And they, I think, helped with our careers. They really got behind us and bought our records. Michigan State, uh, Kalamazoo, that college there, and just all the colleges in the Midwest.
And so, was it racially diverse also, the audience?
Um, Not at first, but then we did some shows in Canada, and Canada had this television show, and we went on right after Jan Jan, and after they broadcast the show that we did, then it got diverse. We started playing a lot in Toronto, Windsor, and so forth, and a lot of Canadian things because Canada was right across the water,
Mm.
Detroit. We were still living in Detroit at that time.
Were you involved with the Mr. Penguin phenomenon at all?
Yes, we were. That's an interesting story. Um, uh, we had at the time when Mr. Penguin came out, we had Why Not Start All Over Again, which was with the Counts, and that was like number 3 on the charts. And so some kind of way the guy who was kind of producing us, Marlon McNichols, he had a deal with Bell Records, and they needed something. Uh, so we went as Lunar Funk, we call ourselves, but we were really the Counts. It was Leroy, myself, and Andrew the drummer. Andrew the drummer did the Mr. Penguin voice, and so we recorded that. It was just a tune that we always played on our breaks as the Counts. And Leroy said, "Why don't we do that tune, that break tune that we do, and put Andrew on there as Mr. Penguin?" And so we did that, and that record beat us. It was number 2, and we were number 3. So we had 2 records in the top 10 at the same time. And we used to hear people say, "Oh, they're better than you guys," and we couldn't say anything. And they'd come up, "Oh, that organ player kills you." I say, "Okay, sure, yeah." And
Well,
that was the no bass sound too. Yeah.
so then would you guys just play it more as a featured song though on the count sets?
No, it was just a little break tune, just something we threw together. When we're getting ready to take our break, uh, somebody'd introduce the band, and we'd be playing doom 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 doom, and that was Mr. Penguin. And so yeah, we just took that and made a record out of it.
But I was curious if after it became a hit, if you guys featured it more prominently.
We didn't do it then
Oh,
because of contract
oh,
things. Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So never really knew. Well, you guys knew, and it came out later on. But at
I
first,
gotcha.
you knew who Lil Funk was. But if you look on the back of Get Down People, which was the Count's biggest record at the time, on the back of the B side of Get Down People was Lunar Funk.
You got to read. You got to read through the lines there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could almost been like Parliament Funkadelic. You could have been the Counts and Lunar Funk.
Exactly. Same thing. Same thing.
Were you guys like wondering why that got over like it did, and some of the other tracks you probably thought were more important maybe didn't get as much exposure?
Uh, well, I know why. Because with Mr. Penguin, the popular dance at the time was the Penguin. So we made sure that the beat was following that Penguin beat. So the little lesson that we didn't learn was to use commerciality when you're putting out songs and you want to sell them. And that's what we did with Lunar Funk. And boom, whereas the Counts, we cool, we want to do this, we want to do this, and we thinking that way instead of trying to sell some records. With Mr. Penguin, we were trying to sell some records and went about it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's hot at the time, you jump on it and use that formula. That's something my friend Ray Parker always talked about. Use the formula, like Ghostbusters and what's that? The Rick James tune, like he did. You use formulas. That's the key to getting a hit record.
Yeah, well, Ray Parker definitely mastered that with radio for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
But he came up. He was listening to us. Ray used to come and listen to us and what have you. And he looked like Leroy. Leroy and Ray favorite. And that was a funny thing. And Ray told Leroy, he said, "Man, I'm gonna grow up. I'm gonna be bigger than you." And Leroy said, "Yeah, okay." Yeah.
wow.
Uh,
And at some point, some Miller played with the Counts, right?
yeah. When we moved to Atlanta, this company down here signed us up and lured us away from Westbound. Um, to me, that was one of our mistakes. We should have stayed with Westbound. But anyway, they lured us down here, and when we got here, we're talking about the Count sound. Well, they said, well, first of all, you guys need a bass player. And so we had to get a bass player. And so that's how Byron stepped in. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I know he was just a kid then, probably, but if you're going to get a bass player, he's a pretty good one to get.
Oh, he was definitely one to get. But, I didn't know. And, I was pretty much in control of how the record sounded or how the music sounded. And I didn't quite know what to do with Byron because I'd never worked with a bass player before. Now if I'd worked with him later on in life, it would have been great. But at that time, I didn't know how to quite work with Byron. But it worked out okay. But it could have been so much better, if I had the experience in knowing how to work with a bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What would you say is the most unforgettable live experience you ever had with the Counts?
Well, there's a lot of them. The main one when we toured with the Funkadelics. When we toured with the Funkadelics and went all over the West Coast. One that's kind of interesting is when I went with Candy Staten to Europe. Everywhere we went, like one instance, Candy had told the people who I'd been with and whatever. So we were coming off the stage and this beautiful woman, all of a sudden she got on her knees and was kind of like worshiping. I said, "Who is she doing that to?" I turned around, there was nobody there. And she was doing it to me. And then she picks up the What's Up Front Counts album, the Jan Jan album, and wanted me to sign them. And that was happening everywhere in Europe. And so my biggest thrill was finding out we were known all over the world. I had no idea, which gets into other things, record companies not letting you know how big you really are. and all that. That's a whole nother thing.
What year would you say that was?
That was about 80, 90, about 90 and going into 2020, actually.
Oh,
That's what
much
with
much later on then.
much later on. Hmm.
And that was with Candy Staten?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.